I think we can all agree that chapter 1134 had one of the craziest cliffhangers ever and potentially confirming one of the wildest theories out there, that Shanks might have a twin brother. As of right now, even with this new revelation, I'm still pretty torn on if it's a Shanks twin, clone, or if it's just regular Shanks. And I apologize in advance if you were looking for a Shanks twin theory video, but I won't be hopping on that twin hype train just yet. In this video, I will be explaining why I believe this mysterious character is still Shanks. To set the scene, we know Loki has a special bounty, but we don't know why. We can theorize it's because of his devil fruit or because he allegedly killed his father, the king. Maybe a combination of both reasons. With the ending of chapter 1135, we know the reason as to why these two mysterious characters are here. It's because they want to find Loki. I also believe these characters are God Knights because they use the summoning circle, which is an ability we've only ever seen the Gorosei use, and obviously these characters aren't Gorosei, so they must be the next closest things, God Knights. Now the question must be asked, why now? Loki has been imprisoned for over 6 years, and the government must know this because they gave him a special bounty. So why now in the 6 years he's been chained up, did the God Knights decide to come? What's changed? Garling is what changed. Garling was the leader of the God Knights up until very recently, where he replaced Saturn as the newest member of the Gorosei. I think Garling is going to be a totally different Gorosei than we've ever seen before. Most of the time, the Gorosei just sit around and delegate things from their office. It wasn't until very recently that Saturn set out to personally fulfill their plans on Egghead. He failed miserably, resulting in his death, and was replaced. I think Emu promoted Garling not only because there was a vacant Gorosei spot, but because Emu knows Garling will get things done, unlike the rest of the Gorosei. And I believe that Garling sent these two God Knights to Elbaf as his first official act as a Gorosei member. I think Garling is going to drastically change the world government's track record as of late of constant L after L into wins, especially with how Vegapunk just spilled the beans on the war between the world government and the Ancient Kingdom. Garling knows they're in the endgame now. I think Garling's prerogative is to actively get things done instead of waiting around and keeping balance, like what the world government has been doing with the Warlords and the Yonko. The Warlords were disbanded, now I think there's a chance they might come after the Yonko, among other powerful characters, like Loki. Don't you guys think it's super weird that Shanks just happened to be at Elbaf right before this potential twin Shanks arrived on the island? Now most fans will argue that Shanks leaving and this person arriving gives more evidence for it being his twin rather than Shanks, because why would Shanks have left and come back so soon? But I think it's the opposite. Shocker, right? If you go back to chapter 1131, Luffy learns that Shanks was on Elbaf and tries to figure out the reason as to why. We learn that Shanks came to the underworld because Loki's minions were knocked unconscious by him. So that means Shanks came to Elbaf for a specific reason, to see Loki. While Luffy doesn't believe this, he asks Loki to tell him why Shanks was here. Loki tells Luffy he won't be getting any answers for free. The next time we see Luffy, he's jettisoned into the air and meets up with the giants carrying his ship. They ask him why he just came from the underworld. Then we get a little flashback showing us that Loki told Luffy not to say anything about them meeting. I think this means Luffy agreed to free him if Loki would tell him why Shanks was there. Now I hope you're connecting the dots and seeing what I'm seeing. Shanks came to Elbaf to speak with Loki, and shortly after, this new Shanks lookalike character just happens to teleport into Elbaf and they're looking for Loki. What are the odds of that? I think Shanks is secretly the leader of the God Knights now, and I know this is a crazy thing to say, but remember Garling was promoted, so someone else had to be promoted to fill his vacant spot as the commander of the God Knights. And if Garling is Shanks' father, that would make him a celestial dragon. I'm not sure the logistics on how or who promotes someone to the God Knight commander's position, but if Garling has any say, I'm sure he would pick his son before anyone else. Now I know what you're thinking. This is all coming out of left field with no evidence to back it up. How can Shanks be the leader of the God Knights if he's a pirate, a Yonko pirate nonetheless, and we've never seen him have any affiliations with the world government or celestial dragons? Oh, but we have, and it's one of the biggest controversial pieces of evidence for whether this new character is Shanks or not. In chapter 907, we the fans were mind blown with the reveal of Shanks meeting with the Gorosei to speak with them about a certain pirate. A lot of people were calling Shanks a traitor since he's a pirate meeting with the opposition. Some fans at the time theorized this couldn't be Shanks but possibly his twin, since we never see his scar or missing arm. And with the revelations in chapter 1134, chapter 907 is more important than ever. While the dialogue in this chapter gives us a substantial amount of support for it being a Shanks twin, in my opinion it makes way more sense for it just being Shanks. So let's break down each line of dialogue in chapter 907 and why it fits Shanks way more. The Gorosei start off by asking this Shanks character what he wants and why he would travel all this way. This line aligns with Shanks since he would have to travel anywhere from the Grand Line to get to them. If it's a Shanks twin brother who would be a celestial dragon, then he would live in the Holy Land where this meeting is taking place. So that means he wouldn't have to travel far. The next line the Gorosei say is, "This is the Reverie, given your standing, you should have nothing to do with politics." Since Shanks is a pirate, this makes perfect sense. The Reverie is all about the affiliated kingdoms of the world government. A pirate like Shanks wouldn't care for that. Then they say, "We only arrange this time on your request." Now I would put this in favor of a Shanks twin for sure, but if Shanks is Garling's son, that makes him a celestial dragon, and a very important one since Garling was the commander of the God Knights during this time. Also, Shanks is known for keeping the peace in the world, which I'm sure the Gorosei respect. He's not a power-hungry pirate like Big Mom or Kaido. If they also know he's a celestial dragon, I feel like this line of dialogue fits very well. And also, it's not like Shanks chose to be taken by the Roger Pirates when he was a baby. Even though he's a pirate now, I think he still holds his celestial status. Also, I don't believe this is the first time Shanks has met with the Gorosei or visited the Holy Land, and I will explain my reasoning for this very shortly. The last line of dialogue comes from the Shanks character, and he says, "There's a pirate I need to talk to you about." Now, this could go either way for Shanks or his twin, but since we know Shanks has been warning people about Blackbeard for a while now, this lines up perfectly with his character. Even in the most recent chapters, Shanks has been trying to intercept Blackbeard, but with no luck. I think whatever Shanks saw in his encounter with Blackbeard back in the day that left him scarred, scared him so much that he'll do whatever it takes in trying to take down Blackbeard, like telling the Gorosei and hoping they can do something to stop him. And I believe there's evidence that supports Shanks telling the Gorosei things about Blackbeard in 907, because in chapter 1107, when Saturn sees Katarina, Devon, and Augur, he tells him he can't believe people of their caliber would be followers. Katarina responds with, "It's because Teach is special," with Saturn replying that he knows about Blackbeard's bloodline, which must be what Shanks told them in chapter 907, because up until that point, the Gorosei and most of the world had no clue who Blackbeard even was. We even have an example of this when Lafitte broke into the Holy Land to recommend Blackbeard for the warlord position. Sengoku remarks that the other pirates would be upset if they promoted an unknown to the position. So if it was Shanks in 907, where's the evidence that this wasn't his first time in the Holy Land? It begins in chapter 968. When Roger returns from Laughtail, Shanks approaches him and asks him a question, resulting in Shanks crying. I think Shanks somehow figured out he had the blood of celestial dragons, or someone told him during his time away from Roger's protection. So Shanks went to Roger to confirm this, and when Shanks learned the truth, he was devastated to find out he's a celestial dragon, because during his time on the Roger Pirates, he would know how terrible the celestial dragons are. I think this plot point is expanded upon further in chapter 1082, with the scene of Shanks and Buggy at Roger's execution. Buggy talks about how Shanks showed so much potential that he knew Shanks could easily become the next generation's pirate king, and because of that, Buggy abandoned his dream. But in the flashback, for some odd reason, Shanks tells Buggy that he's changed his mind for now and isn't ready to go after the One Piece and become the Pirate King, but he'll still be a pirate. I think Shanks changed his mind because of this newfound revelation that he's a celestial dragon. From Roger's execution, which was 24 years ago, until the next time canonically we see Shanks recruiting Yasopp, there's a 2-year time difference. I think sometime during these 2 years, Shanks traveled to the Holy Land to find out more information about his lineage. This is where he would have met his father Garling and was officially acknowledged by the Gorosei as a true-blooded celestial dragon. I think the situation that Shanks is in is that even though he's a celestial, he still wants to be a pirate, which obviously angers Garling. But if Shanks is Garling's only son, then maybe he wouldn't officially cut him off as a true celestial, like what happened to Doflamingo's family, in hopes that Shanks would one day claim his birthright as the heir to the Figerland family. I find it weird that Shanks only decided to recently go after the One Piece. What was he doing all this time? Shanks already had a crazy head start over most of his competition with knowing where all the road poneglyphs were because of his time on the Roger Pirates. Basically what I'm saying is whatever caused Shanks to abandon his dream of finding the One Piece for so long has to be a pretty big deal. Him finding out about his celestial lineage would be reason enough. Shanks also could have been working secretly for the God Knights this whole time, which is why we never hear about Shanks making any serious moves in the One Piece world. Another idea is what if Shanks made a deal with the Gorosei when he met them in 907. Maybe Shanks asked them to help him stop Blackbeard. In exchange, Shanks would finally fulfill his destiny of becoming a fully fledged celestial dragon. Or what if freeing Loki is Shanks' answer to finally defeating Blackbeard? Remember, Loki told Luffy if he freed him, then Loki would destroy one rival pirate crew of Luffy's choosing. Maybe Loki's devil fruit is so powerful he isn't bluffing when he says this. If Shanks isn't being controlled and it's his own plan to free Loki, maybe he'll use Loki to stop Blackbeard. Blackbeard. And if this plan is Garling's and not Shanks, we know Shanks is always 2 steps ahead of most of the characters in One Piece. Maybe Shanks warned Loki when he was in Elbaf that he would be coming back as God Knight Shanks rather than Pirate Shanks. What if Shanks also told Dory and Brogy to go help the Straw Hats on Egghead, knowing they would bring them back to Elbaf and be a deterrent to stop him and this other God Knight from achieving their goal? And here's another super out there idea. We know the warlords were something the government invented to balance power in the world. The government made strong pirates into an affiliated faction of the world government's military power. So if I'm right about Shanks discovering his lineage right after Roger's execution, what if ever since then Shanks has always been a secret agent God Knight for the Celestials? What if there's some secret position like what the warlords were, but for Shanks? Shanks would be this double agent of sorts, still being a pirate but also a God Knight, working for the world government. Remember in Marineford when Shanks arrived, he basically ended the war, and none of the top Marines like Sengoku or Akainu wanted to deal with Shanks. Maybe they knew he was a celestial dragon and secretly working for them so they couldn't fight him. But for Shanks to be a secret God Knight, there must be a good reason as to why he would agree to be one, and I could think of a couple. The first one being from my good friend Dax Sake. He has a theory that Emu has some power over every single celestial dragon. If this is true, maybe Shanks has no choice but to obey. Another way is maybe the world government is keeping someone very dear to Shanks hostage, like Uta or his mother, and he has to obey them or else they'll be killed. This leads me to Shanks' Yonko status. Shanks became a Yonko 6 years ago. 6 years ago was also the time Loki allegedly killed his father and was defeated by the giants and imprisoned in the underworld. A popular theory right now is that Shanks helped in defeating Loki, and this is what granted him his Yonko status. I believe this to be the case, but what are the odds that Shanks was on Elbaf during this time, the exact moment that Loki decided to kill his father, and Shanks was there to save the day? I would say a very slim chance, but I have a scenario on why Shanks was there and how everything unfolded the way it did. First, we must go back and explain how it all led to this. It starts off with Big Mom. Big Mom almost hit the jackpot for eventually allying herself with Elbaf because Loki proposed to her daughter Lola. With this marriage, Big Mom would have the kingdom of Elbaf under her control, and in her own words, this would make her the Pirate King, because she would be able to defeat any Yonko and even the world government. Now, do you really think something of this magnitude would go unnoticed by the world government? There's no way. I think the world government crafted a plan to kill Loki so the marriage wouldn't happen, which would cancel this union of power for Big Mom. This is where Shanks comes in. If Shanks is a secret God Knight, they would activate him and give him the mission of killing Loki and trying to get King Harold's legendary Devil Fruit. Shanks and the other God Knights would teleport into Elbaf's castle, attack, and kill King Harold. Loki would show up to try and save his father. I think Loki overwhelmed all of the God Knights except Shanks, and maybe Loki hockey blasted them like the Iron Giant did against the other Gorosei. So they were forced to teleport back from where they came, leaving just Shanks to fight Loki. At this point, I think Shanks tried to tell Loki the truth and that he was very sorry about his father's death, and in an offering of peace, he let Loki eat Elbaf's legendary Devil Fruit. The rest of the giants would show up and blame Loki for the king's death, and praise Shanks for stopping him. Shanks would have to go along with this narrative because him being a God Knight is supposed to stay a secret. This encounter would make the world government promote Shanks to Yonko status, and he would be revered in Elbaf as its savior, thus making the world government have an inside man in the land of Elbaf through Shanks, just like what they had with Mother Carmel. Shanks would tell the Gorosei that he failed in obtaining the legendary Devil Fruit because Loki ate it, accordingly granting Loki his special bounty. Loki would know the truth of Shanks, that he's a pirate but also secretly working for the world government. This would be the reason Loki calls Shanks a coward. The fact that Lola decided not to marry Loki would be the reason that the world government wouldn't have to intervene again, and they would be content with Loki just being in prison, which would explain why nothing happened for over 6 years, until the arrival of these two God Knights, which I can only assume is because of Garling. Now, since Garling became a Gorosei, he's not going to be sitting around wanting to maintain peace in the world. He wants to start making moves. I think Shanks was told about this plan to invade Elbaf and to make necessary preparations to be ready, since Shanks lives a double life. This is why I believe Shanks was in Elbaf to warn Loki about Garling's plan. He told Loki that very soon he would be coming back as a God Knight again to try and kill or capture him. And that's why I think Shanks was betting the house the giants would bring the Straw Hats back to Elbaf, so Luffy will be there to stop Shanks and the God Knight's plans, since Shanks cannot disobey them for some unknown reason. And before anyone comments that if Shanks is a secret God Knight, why is he doing things that actively defy the world government's wishes? Shanks would be in a position like the warlords. He gets to remain a pirate, but ultimately his allegiance is to the world government. And remember, warlords like Crocodile, Doflamingo, and Blackbeard all swore allegiances to the world government, but they still did pirate activities that directly defied the world government's wishes. Shanks still does too, but he gets even more of a pass because he's also a celestial dragon. He's one of them. He's not some pirate criminal beneath them. As I end this video, I have one more idea I wanted to bring up that isn't really related to this theory, but I thought it was a cool idea, which is Shanks' real name. Shanks was found by Roger at God Valley when he was a baby, and unless Shanks' name was written on his clothes or the chest he was found in, this might mean Shanks isn't his true name, it's just the name the Roger pirates decided to call him, meaning he might have another name that Garling gave him. And if Shanks went to the Holy Land to learn about his origin, what if Garling gave Shanks his iconic sword, the sword Shanks carries now called Griffin? And since we know Roger's sword and his son share the same name, does this mean Shanks' real name is Griffin Figureland? Now, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button and leaving a like, I would greatly appreciate it. With that being said, I know there's a strong chance this theory can be debunked within the next chapter, but I just feel very strongly that this mysterious character is still Shanks, and I hope I provided enough evidence as to why. And as always, I would love to know what you guys think, whether you agree with me or not. But that's all I have for this theory. Until next time.